Hello, welcome to the Year 6 SAT workshop presentation. The aim of this is just to take you through some of the key information around the Year 6 SATs, just to familiarise yourself and the children with what to expect. We're going to explain how the scoring works, so the children will get a raw score and a scaled score, so we're going to go into a little bit of detail about how that works. Identify ways in which you can help at home to help support the children and get them as ready as they possibly can be. And then also go through the timetabling and logistical arrangements. So the SATs start on the 9th of May and they run for 4 days through to Thursday the 12th of May. On the slide you'll see the order of the tests. So on Monday the children will sit their spelling, punctuation and grammar test. That's split into 2 papers. They do their punctuation and grammar for 45 minutes and then there'll be a very short 2 or 3 minute break while we swap papers over, and then they'll do a spelling test which takes around 20 minutes. On Tuesday they'll sit their reading paper which takes 1 hour. That time is inclusive of reading the text and answering the questions. Wednesday then is the sort of slightly longer one. That's the 2 maths papers. So they'll sit their arithmetic paper first, which is half an hour. We'll go over what's going to be on the papers later on in the slides. And then Maths 1 is their reasoning paper, so unpicking kind of the logic behind maths. And then on Thursday, the final day, they'll sit Maths 2, which is again another reasoning paper for the children, and they are 45 minutes. So we keep it to 1 test per day really where possible. The arithmetic is slightly shorter, so it doesn't feel like it's too long for the children. That timetable is set by the testing agency, so we don't really have any control over that. They sort of prescribe as and when we have to sit the tests. What we've decided to do this year, because of the large cohort that we've got, we've decided to complete the tests in 2 sittings. So nearer to the time, your child will find out whether they're going to be in Group 1 or Group 2. And as you can see from the slides, we're then going to just stagger the start time. So Group 1 will sit their tests at the normal time as just mentioned. Group 2, they'll be occupied with members of staff for about an hour, and then they'll sit their tests at a slightly later time. This just allows us to give the children the maximum amount of space, but also the maximum amount of adult support if required. It's really important that the children are in school all week during SATs week. Obviously, things do happen and we're prepared for that, but if for any reason your child cannot make it into school, you need to make sure that you've phoned the school and spoken to either Mrs. Moody, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Kurt or Miss Bowles. You need to make sure one of us is aware. If possible, obviously the children will be in school all week, but obviously things do happen out of our control. SATs is often seen as a bit of a worrying time for the children, but actually I think if we look back on previous years, the Year 6 children absolutely love SATs week. Breakfast club is open, so from about 8 AM the school will be open for children to come in. We do have children arriving just before 8 AM, which is fine. Staff will be here getting things set up. During SATs week, children will come straight to the hall. There'll be the radio on, their friends will be there, they can have a chat to the teachers. They then need to select whether they want a bacon sandwich, sausage sandwich, there'll be a vegetarian option or cereal. There's also fruit juices, teas and coffees provided. That's all completely free of charge, that's provided by the school, and it just encourages the children to get in early, get themselves settled for the papers and just get themselves in a nice calm environment. We do ask that children are sent with additional snacks and fluids for the week, and we do need their PE kits in every day. We try and make SATs week as little about the tests as possible really. So once the children have finished their tests for that day, we tend to take them outside as much as we possibly can and do lots of fun activities and games. So just to explain a little about how the results work then. So for example, if the paper was out of 50 marks, your child will get a raw score, which is the amount of correct answers they got on a paper. So they might get 45 out of 50, for example. That's then converted into a scaled score. That's determined by the government. So for example, 100 as a scaled score is expected standard. Anything that drops below 100 would place the child as working towards the expected standard, and roughly anything over 110 would place the children at greater depth, which is working above the expected standard. We'll get the results around the second week in July. We try and get them out to you as soon as possible. Obviously, you know, they're the child's results, so we try and get them out to you on the reports as soon as we possibly can. It's normally within a day or two. Obviously, certain children are going to need additional adaptations for the SATS week. We've been having a practice SATS week this week where some of the children have had an opportunity to work with adults, or they might have received scribe support, reader support, etc. That's something that your class teacher will be aware of, and they might even talk it through with you. We'll link that to any provision maps or additional support that they already receive throughout their time in Year 6, so it's not a surprise for the children. So if there are any concerns about your child being able to read the papers or access the papers or handwriting, etc., that's something that the Year 6 team will have already taken into account, and there's already plans in place for that. There's some top tips there which might be quite useful for parents to have a look at home. We're going to try and communicate with you as much as we possibly can around things that you can do at home to help. There's going to be a booklet going home with important websites that you can use and things like that. Really, it's just about encouraging your child of what they're doing. So things like homework, reading, they're going to be absolutely crucial to making sure that your child can complete the SATS week. Positive encouragement, really. We try not to put any pressure on the children around SATS week. We're incredibly proud of what they've done over the last 4 years at Newport Juniors. So really, this is just the end point for them. But you know, we try not to put pressure on them. We just encourage them to just show off what they can do. As many things as you can do at home, so come at it from different angles. So if it's maths, for example, try and do like impromptu things when you're in and around the home. If it's writing that they're working on, try and get them to perhaps write emails, write letters, take notes, bullet points, etc. And most importantly, make sure your child is aware that getting stuck is not a problem. That's something we actively encourage in Year 6. The best way to learn sometimes is by making a mistake or by getting stuck and learning from it. So just really reinforce with the children that as long as they do their best, that's all anyone can ask for. So we're now just going to go through the maths specific part of the SATS week. So children will sit 3 maths papers in total. Their arithmetic will be first, followed by 2 reasoning papers. The arithmetic is out of 40 and the 2 reasonings are out of 35 marks each, giving the children a maximum of 110 marks. So their raw score for that would be 110 or lower, and then that's then converted into a scaled score. So the first paper they'll sit is their arithmetic paper. It's important to note that all equipment the children need during SATS week will be provided by school. The children don't need to bring anything with them. They don't need any pencil cases or anything like that. Everything they need will already be out on the tables for the children as they arrive. This one really is important that the children are working at an efficient pace. They'll have 30 minutes and there's normally about 35 questions, so you can see that in some cases there's less than a minute per question really. So just to go over what type of questions the children are going to be solving, these here are all taken from previous arithmetic papers. So it's very much what we call a black and white fluency. So there's no words to read on the arithmetic. It is just literally calculations for the children to solve. It covers the 4 operations. It covers fractions, decimals and percentages. So things that the children should be really, really confident in working through. So just to show you how it'll actually look for the children, again, this is taken directly from a previous SATS paper. So the children have got this grid here. That's where they're expected to do their working out. And then the box here is where the children need to place their final answer. The reason we highlight that to you now is because if the child was to place the answer here, but not in the answer box, they wouldn't receive the mark, even if it was the correct answer. So it's so important that the children remember to pop their answer in the answer box. So questions like this then, slightly more formal methods are required. You'll see this is a 2-mark question. So if the child was to achieve the correct answer, they would get 2 marks regardless. If the child was to put the wrong answer in the answer box, there is a chance they could still be awarded 1 mark, excuse me, if they've used a formal method. So in class we actively encourage the children to try and use a formal method for division, because if they were to use a formal method and perhaps they made one arithmetic error in their calculating, they can still get 1 mark for that. So again, here's an example of 3 questions the children might be up against. What we try and do in class as well is encourage the children to draw on other areas of maths, to sort of reason from known facts. So question 11, for example, 630 divided by 9. What we wouldn't want is children doing that in a bus stop, a short division method. Reason being, in the number 630, the children should recognise that there's a multiple of 9 in 63. So they should recognise that that's the 7th multiple, but as that's 10 times greater, their answer needs to be 10 times greater. So they should really be able to calculate that as 70 using a mental approach. They might then choose to go back and check it with a written method, which is what we'd encourage. Excuse me. And again here, 1.28 multiplied by 100. Again, we probably discourage the children from doing that in a column multiplication. What we'd be looking there is for the children to recognise that when you multiply a number by 100, all your digits move 2 places to the left in the place value column. So again, it's just about children thinking mathematically and recognising the most efficient way to solve a question. So in terms of the mark scheme then, if the question is requiring an answer that's presented as a fraction, children are sometimes awarded the mark for equivalent fractions. So here the correct answer is 3/5, but it does say that they would also be awarded 6/10 or 0.6 because they are all equivalent values. However, sometimes it does state that the children need to present their answer in its simplest form. Something at home that you may wish to work on is children's ability to get from one fraction to another by simplifying it. That's a really, really important skill. So to move on to the reasoning papers then, the children will sit 2 reasoning papers. Again, all the equipment will be provided. So they'll have a rubber, a ruler, a protractor and a mirror, and obviously we'll provide them with a new pencil each day. Slightly different to the arithmetic, these will cover the full range of the maths curriculum. So all the areas that aren't covered on the arithmetic, so your data handling, shape, measure, there is still number work on there, problem solving, etc. The questions do get progressively harder, so the first probably 8 or 9 questions are aimed at the full Key Stage 2 teaching range, so year 3, year 4 and year 5, and then as the children work through the paper, that's when they begin to access some of the year 6, the more complex questions. So again, the setup is exactly the same. There's the grid for the children to do their working out in. Again, the answer box for them, and it's just worth noting that as that's a 2-mark question, there is a chance that the children could still be awarded 1 mark with an incorrect answer if they just made 1 error in their working out. So it says a pack of paper has 150 sheets, 4 children each take 7 sheets. Now what we found in previous years, the reason children find the reasoning papers hard is because they can't always get to the point of identifying what they've got to do. So here what we'd be looking for is the children to recognise that first they must figure out how many sheets were taken all together. So they need to multiply 4 by 7 to get 28, and then they need to subtract 28 from 150, okay? What we do find sometimes is children will perhaps do one part of the calculation and then put an answer rather than then going through and solving the rest. This one here is another good example. So the children here are required to fill in the missing digits from the multiplication. Again, what we'd encourage here is the children to think mathematically. So what do they know about the 6 times table? So here we're looking for a multiple of 6 that ends in a 6 here. So it could either be 6 multiplied by 1 or it could be 6 multiplied by 6. Both of those answers would give you 6 in the units column, and then work from there. So that narrows it down to 2 options rather than the children just starting with 1 and then trying 2 and then trying 3, etc. So in class we're doing lots of work around that on using information from the question to help us work in the most efficient manner. There'll also be questions on Roman numerals. So again, it's taking areas from year 3, year 4, year 5 and year 6, which is why our daily math sessions that we do are so important, because it enables us to kind of backtrack with objectives and go through all the things that perhaps the children haven't done much of in year 6. Again, this is another really good example. So on Saturday, Laura read 2/5 of her book. On Sunday, she read the other 90 pages. How many pages are in Laura's book? And again, a common misconception for children is that they might see 2/5, they might see 90, and they might think they've got to find 2/5 of 90. What we'd be looking at here is the children recognising that if Laura has read 2/5, the other 90 pages, well, that must make up 3/5. So if 90 pages is equivalent to 3/5, 1/5 would be equivalent to 30 pages. So 5/5, or the full amount, would be equivalent to 150 pages. So the actual calculating isn't particularly difficult, but it's just about children interpreting the question correctly and knowing what they've got to do to solve it. So in terms of what we're doing in school to prepare the children for their SATs, primarily it's quality first teaching. So our planning is based on fluency, reasoning and problem solving, and that's built into our weekly planning. We do daily math sessions every day after lunch, so that's an opportunity for us to recap on objectives from the full Key Stage 2 curriculum, but also we can tailor that to anything that we've identified as the children needing a little bit more support on. We can be very flexible with that and just get that short, sharp burst of maths after lunch. Lessons are planned from analysis of assessment, so we're currently completing some maths assessments this week. So our planning after half term will be taken from a question level analysis, so we'll go through and look at where the gaps are for the children, and then we can sort of prescribe our planning from there. We have additional support each week from sixth form pupils from the Adams Grammar, so maths specialists come in and they work with the children on a weekly basis. There'll be practice SAT questions, so the children will be really familiar with the layout and the structure and the timings of assessment papers. We talk to the children, we don't want it to be a taboo subject, we want to talk to them about their SATs. There's lots of opportunities for the children to ask questions. Really, we want to put their mind at ease and prepare them that it's nothing to be concerned about at all. And then finally, there's nurture support available in school if needed. That's something that as parents you'll be aware of if your child does receive that. Okay, so now we're going to go through the English SATs papers. You might notice a change of outfit. It's because we're filming it on separate days. I didn't have to just nip out and change, so apologies for that. So we're going to go through 3 aspects of the English side of it then. So we've got our reading, we've got our SPAG and writing. So the reading test is 1 hour, so that's the longest test that the children will sit. 50 marks are available, and the reading test is made up of 3 separate texts for the children to work from. They do get increasingly more difficult as they go through, so it's really important that early on the children are able to pick up those early 1-mark questions. So the hour that the children have, that encompasses reading all 3 texts and then answering all 3 sets of questions. We do a lot of work with children in class around how to manage their time efficiently, so that when they get to their actual SATs week, they're really confident about working to a time limit. So on the screen now is just the content domain. So these are the things the children are going to be tested against. So things like making predictions, summarising lots of ideas from 1 paragraph, retrieval skills, and understanding and explaining the meaning of words in context. As staff, we kind of break these down and we tailor our planning to make sure that each of the objectives are being given time within class. So when the children come to sit their reading paper, they've had lots of opportunity to practice all the different skills that they're going to be required to use. So one of the texts will always be a non-fiction text. Normally is 1 non-fiction, 1 fiction, and then the third one could be like poetry or something like that. So this is just one taken from a previous paper. Non-fiction is quite useful for children because it's quite laid out in quite a friendly manner, so in terms of text boxes, etc. So when the children are answering questions, quite often the question will direct them to where they need to be looking. So for example, it might say, looking in the paragraph about the Space Hotel. So it's really important that the children are reading the question and they can then synthesize the text down and find out where they need to be looking quite quickly. Just an example of some of the questions then. So again, they're broken down into 1 or 2 marks. Later on in the paper, there are some 3-mark questions available as well. Really important that the children are reading the key information from the question. So where it mentions about the International Space Station, or where it mentions about Anusha, they need to then be looking in the text for those key words or phrases rather than rereading the whole text every time. This is a poem that was in a couple of years ago. This is one that children found particularly difficult. We do a lot of work in school, and I imagine at home as well, around fiction and non-fiction. Poetry is something that children aren't quite as confident with, so if you were to do anything at home to help them, we'd certainly recommend looking at poetry, getting children to perhaps have a go at writing poetry and things like that, because that is one that's caused problems for them in the past. In terms of supporting at home then, so one of the key things is just listening to your child read. You can pick up so much just from the way that your child reads aloud, their expression, their fluency, their ability to pay attention to punctuation, things like that. Also flip that around, read to your child, let the child be the listener. Try and present them with a range of text, so things like newspapers, leaflets, magazines, books, things like that. Getting the children familiar with as many different genres of readers as possible. And then finally, challenge your children about their reading when they're at home. So there are prompts in the reading diaries. There's things you can ask them around who their favourite character is, perhaps why they think the author has chose a certain word, what they think is going to happen next, what's already happened before, things like that. It's just going to get the children to think a lot more about the text they've read rather than just keep reading the words on the page. Moving on to the SPAG then. So SPAG is spelling, punctuation and grammar. This is split into 2 tests. So the children will sit their paper 1, which is their punctuation and grammar aspect. That's 45 minutes. And then there'll be a quick turnover. And then the children will sit a spelling test. So there'll be 20 words for the children to have a go at spelling. That takes around 15 minutes. Just to point out, with the spelling test, they will be taken from the Key Stage 2 curriculum list. So it's really important that your children are actively doing their homework, because the homework we send home, again, is taken directly from those Key Stage 2 curriculum word lists. So the paper 1, the punctuation and grammar one, really important that children remember that they're being graded on their capital letters and full stops. If the children were to be asked, for example, to write a sentence using an adverb, even if they use the adverb correctly, if they didn't use a capital letter or they didn't use a full stop, they would still not be awarded the mark, because it's testing them throughout the paper on their complete knowledge of SPAG. So it's really important that children get into the habit of capitalising anything that needs a capital letter, so start of a sentence, proper nouns, etc. And handwriting as well. If the examiner can't read it, it will be marked incorrectly. So again, at home, if you were to practice anything, perhaps just get the children to practice their handwriting. And then these are some examples of the questions. So this one asks, which pair of verbs correctly completes the sentence below? It might sound obvious, but for the children it's just important to point out they're asked to tick 1. If they were to tick more than 1, they would instantly get a 0. Even if they ticked the correct answer and 1 more, it would still be marked incorrectly because they haven't followed the instructions. So again, just really emphasising to the children the importance of reading the question. So that one there is asking the children to show which part of the sentence is a relative clause. So what we want the children to do there is spot that which is a relative pronoun which will precede a relative clause. So they need to put a tick in the box. Again, what we wouldn't want is children to circle the relative clause or put a tick above it. They need to make sure that it goes in the box. These all sound like really obvious things, but perhaps with a little bit of pressure, sometimes children can just make those simple errors and it can cost them marks. This is a common question that crops up most years. So the children are given the word cover and they're asked to use the word cover as a noun and then also as a verb. So for example, the children here need to use the word cover as an object, and then there they have to use the word cover as an action, so in to cover something. again, it's just worth pointing out on there, even if they do the skill correctly, they will only be awarded the mark if they have capitalised their sentence and if it ends with a full stop. And then when we finish that part of the paper, we'll move on to the spelling test. So this is exactly how it will be presented to the children. The children will hear each word 3 times. So for example, we would say, Sarah wanted to be an explorer and discover new lands. We'd then repeat the word, and then we'd ask the children, we'd say to the children, write the word discover. So they get lots of opportunity to hear the word. At the end of the test, we then run through all the words again, just in case the children have missed any. So we've got words like discover, the spy was on a secret mission, so the word they'd have to spell there was mission. This one here, they're asked to spell the word loose. Here, they're asked to spell the word sign. And here, they're asked to spell the word nation. It's just worth pointing out that each of the words will be testing something specific within spelling. So whether it's silent letters, whether it's double letters, whether it's, for example, the sound of shun, whether it's S-I-O-N, C-I-O-N, T-I-O-N, they're testing the children on whether or not they can spell those words correctly using the spelling patterns. In school, we use the no-nonsense spelling framework, so children are getting regular lessons where they're being explicitly taught spellings and also working on how they can develop their memory of spellings too. In terms of helping at home then, so the CGP books, they're available from W.H. Smith's or Waterstones. Again, like, it's very, very similar to the maths ones. They're the ones that we'll use in school. Children should be familiar with those. In fact, over half term, the children will be coming home with a CGP book for some half term homework. So if you were to invest in any resources, they're the ones that we would recommend. So just to move on to the writing aspect of it then, so there is no explicit test for writing at Key Stage 2. That's teacher assessed, so that means that the teachers in Year 6 will be continually grading the children as we move through the year, and at the end of the year, around June time, the 3 Year 6 teachers will submit our formal assessment for the children's writing. The children will be based in one of 3 areas, so they could either be working towards national standard, working at national standard, or working at greater depth. Despite the fact this is teacher assessed, so it's judged by ourselves, that is regularly moderated. So we work with other teachers across the school to moderate. The senior leadership team will come and moderate, and then there is also a chance that we could be moderated by the local authority, who will come in to sort of ratify the judgments that we've made and check the sufficient evidence is in place. So it's quite a rigorous process. So the children will be really familiar with these objectives. In the front of their English book, they will have an assessment grid with all 3 standards on. As we're working throughout the year and we do assessed pieces, the children will be graded against their ability to use these statements. So this one here is working towards the expected standard, and the sort of things you're expected to do to meet that is to use paragraphs correctly, use cohesive devices. So cohesive devices are anything that aids the flow of your writing and makes it enjoyable for the reader. Basic things such as capital letters, full stops, exclamation marks. There's also an emphasis on spelling as well, so children being able to spell the range of Key Stage 2 words. And finally, handwriting, which is a really, really important one. Children are expected to use legible joined handwriting throughout their work. It's important to note that in order to move past this standard, so in order to move past working towards the expected standard, children need to have evidence in their writing of every objective. If there are areas that the children aren't meeting, they would then stay within this standard. So once they've shown they can complete all of those objectives, they can then move on to working at the expected standard. The objectives then obviously change, so they become a little bit more difficult. So it's then about grammatical structures, using a range of sentence types, so compound sentences, complex, simple, relative clauses, etc. The level of punctuation increases, so inverted commas, punctuation for parenthesis, which is your brackets, your dashes and your commas, and then also colons, semicolons, dashes and hyphens as well. Some children will then be working at greater depth. You'll see that there are far less objectives, but they become more difficult for the children to meet. So this is really about control over writing. So it's about managing the level of formality and showing that you can use both informal and formal writing with an appropriate level of control. It's about selecting the correct verbs for meanings and then being able to show evidence of a full range of punctuation between clauses, so your colons and your semicolons. In terms of what we're doing then, so we've got a really engaging curriculum for writing. I know the children recently have been using the King Henry VIII Executioner book, and from that there were some fantastic pieces of work produced, so we try and make sure that it's a really engaging curriculum. The children have clear next steps and targets, so they all know about their assessment grid. They know that the things that have dots next to them are the things they're working towards. During assessed rights as well, teachers will signpost children to what they need to do better next time. And then we have a range of classroom resources on offer, so working walls, displays, we've got writing mats, spelling resources available. So there's lots of things there to help the children to improve in their writing. The best way you can help at home is just simply to get them to write. So lots of different things, things like emails, letters. If you're going shopping, perhaps write in the shopping list to use colons, commas, etc. And then just stopping and saying to the children, are all the capital letters in? Are all the full stops in? Because children could be fantastic writers and have brilliant creation, but sometimes it's the easy things like capital letters that they just miss out. So just to kind of bring it to a close then, obviously we want every child at this school to reach their potential. We're so incredibly proud of what the children have done this year, especially given the pandemic and the state of affairs for the last 2 years with education. I think the home learning and having to reintegrate to school has been really difficult for the children. They've shown how incredibly resilient they are, and we as staff are incredibly proud of them, regardless of SATs. We want the children to be able to recognise how hard they've worked and how well they've done during their 4 years with us. So we do like to take them to Alton Towers at the end of their SATs week. It's normally within a couple of weeks of them completing their SATs. They'll also have things like their leavers, hoodies. They have lots of exciting things after the SATs, so making fruit cocktails. We've got our sports days. We've got projects that we do across the school as well. So there's lots of things to look forward to. What we would say is that if there are any concerns or any worries or anything like that, then please, the earlier we know about them, the better. So feel free to approach either your class teachers, Mr. Rotherham, Mrs. Moody, anyone like that, and hopefully we can put your mind at ease and support the children in any way we can.